Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's episode of the Power of Power podcast, brought to you by Centrica Business Solutions. My name is Chimera David Harbor, and it's my pleasure to be your host for today's episode. If we haven't met before, I am the Global Customer Success Manager here at Centrica Business Solutions, and I serve as the subject matter expert to our global network of partners and their customers to empower them with resources that drive energy and operational performance across their organizations. This episode is a wonderful conversation that I'm looking to have with Louise Becart, project engineer at Pincroft Dyeing and Printing Company. Among her many responsibilities, Louise co-led the establishment of a web-based energy management system using panoramic power technology at the Pincroft, Lancashire, UK plant. So it's a pleasure for me to have you in today's episode, Louise, and I'm excited to listen and chat with you, particularly in how smart energy management enables your team to reduce your carbon footprint through more efficient use of energy. So would you, kindly introduce yourself to our listeners, Louise, this morning?
Hi. So yeah, as you said, I'm a project engineer for Pincroft. I've been working at Pincroft for 5 years now, leading continuous improvement projects across the site. Pincroft is a commission dyer, printer, and finisher in the UK, who's celebrating its 130th anniversary in
Oh,
textile
wow.
manufacturing next year. So big milestone for us.
Congratulations.
So we process over 20 million meters of fabric each year on continuous bleaching, dyeing, printing, and finishing machines. And after 130 years, it's a pleasure to bring Pincroft in the 21st century by using all the technology of Industry 4.0.
Awesome. This is some really interesting context. 130 years means you have to be been doing something right. So congratulations to you and the team at Pincroft. I'm just imagining, Louise, did you start off thinking that you were going to work in, printing and dyeing company? How did you get into this role as a project engineer?
Well, I studied engineering in France, and towards the end of my studies, which were aimed at general engineering, I realized that um, I found out about textiles engineering and how technical textiles are everywhere, and so I went into the world of textiles, ended up in Manchester in the UK, and then that's how I ended up working in Lancashire.
Textiles and technical. You would
Yeah.
not typically associate those two words together. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about that. So you mentioned about some of those equipments, right, that you're familiar with, you use at your Lancashire location. For some of our listeners, they might be thinking about like large printing rollers or,
hmm
presses or things like that. Is that what you typically encounter every day?
Yeah, so the way I would describe it, think about a washing machine the length of a football pitch.
Okay, I don't
And
have that one.
that's pretty much the scale we're talking about. It's huge, huge machines using a lot of water,
Oh,
steam,
wow.
gas, a fair amount of electricity as well, but mostly steam and hot water.
Yeah, that's a lot of water I can imagine.
hmm
And with all this equipment, is it like really hot during the summer days, especially if you're working indoors?
Yeah, it can be hot. Fortunately, we're in the UK, so it doesn't get too hot in summer. But
That's awesome.
yeah, it can be hot, but we are always trying to insulate as much as possible so we can recover as much heat as possible because to us heat is very important. We we recycle as much
Mm,
water as we can.
that's
We've got
good.
a full heat recovery system covering the whole site. So it can you can feel the heat, but it's not as bad as what it might have been, back at the beginning of the century.
Yeah, for our listeners, Louis just mentioned about a very interesting solution, heat recovery system. That could be something worth exploring, and we might be able to touch on that later during this conversation. So I want to just mention quickly, Louise, I read this article on the Telegraph the other day, and I was drawn to this quote by Paul Smith. He's the executive vice president, the UK general manager for Salesforce. And this is what he said. He said, the crucial element that businesses hoping to achieve greater sustainability must realize is the long term benefit of making changes here and now. Where would you say you are today in terms of your carbon reduction goals at Pincroft?
Well, to be honest with you, we started on this path more than 20 years ago. The heat recovery system was installed a good 10 years ago. But
Okay.
I think what is critical is to stay abreast with the latest technologies. So, using pulses, using smart sensors, harnessing data, and what you do with that data. It's all current
Mm,
technologies, current issues that we need to stay abreast with. And I think the the carbon reduction conversation needs to happen every day. It's not like,
mm,
oh, we've done this project, so we
right.
sorted now, because something new is gonna come up in 3 years, 5 years, I don't know. And at that point, we need to look at that something new, because it's it's continuous improvement. It's not just, oh, we've done that, tick, and moving on.
Exactly. Do you think that some of maybe other industry partners, or let's say industry competitors, are they pushing you to constantly innovate, or is this something that is just part of the Pincroft culture?
Well, to give you an idea, our energy spend is 15% of our sales. So if you want to remain competitive, in terms of cost in the
Exactly.
textile world, especially where we're talking about very low margins, you have
Mm.
to be able to do these cost saving.
So it is really tied to the long-term success of for Pincroft.
Yeah,
It's not just like, oh, you're doing it because you want to put a green label on your fabric. You're doing it because you
no.
really see the
It's
long-term value.
yeah, there is really a long-term value to it, because yeah, it helps you improve the bottom line at the end of the day. If you're saving on energy and resources, it's money you're not spending on it. So
Correct. That's so true. Thank you for sharing that. I noticed also that especially on this side of the pond in North America, there are a lot of employees, like myself, and others who are possibly listening to this podcast that are really, voicing out more visibility from their employers to how they're addressing sustainability issues, like climate change, like transition to renewable energy. Are you seeing something similar in the UK?
yeah, um, the way I see it is that it's up to us to push it to our employers. So I would go to my boss and tell him, look, there's this, let's do it. It's good. It's good for the environment. It's good economically. It's worth it. Let's do it. And I think it's up to us that we are probably a generation more aware of the climate change
I agree.
issues, and I think it's up to us to push it. And yeah, I think if you can show a return on investment, why not do it? Well,
No,
um,
I hope all the managers are listening into this. Please listen to your employees. They know what they're talking about, and they can prove that, with a lot of data present today. So that's really good. And I'm going to take a moment and just imagine that I am one of those managers, right? I have about, say, 30 employees and I use up a decent amount of energy, water, natural gas, electricity to produce my goods. And I also have a decent sales. What would you say I can do as like a first step in enabling the reduction of my carbon footprint?
Well, I think one of the first steps is identifying your waste. Where are you wasting your energy? Which is what we've done, basically what we've achieved thanks to Power Radar. It's not only because the waste we knew they were here, but
Okay.
we didn't have anything to prove it. We didn't have the data to back what we were saying. Whereas when you've got data, you can't deny data. Look, the data is here. There's waste being
Exactly.
made there. And if you reduce this waste, you can make that much more money.
Hmm. Well, was that easy for you to acquire this data? How did you come across getting this data?
So at the beginning, we decided that if we wanted it to work, we had to do it across the board. So we had to do it for electricity, gas,
Hmm.
steam, water. It had to cover everything, otherwise it wouldn't be as effective as it could be. So we started with one asset which uses all these type of energies,
Okay.
and so once we had proven the concept on this one asset and we could show minute by minute how much energy we were using by meter of fabric produced, because we also measured the output of our machines with the same tools.
Oh, wow. So you're connecting energy and your production output.
Yes,
Oh,
so we can
wow.
measure carbon footprint of our fabric, which is it's amazing because now everything is relative. Um,
Exactly.
you're not just saying, well, we've used less energy this year. Well, everyone's used less energy this year because of the pandemic, but uh, how much less energy by meter of fabric produced have you used? That's what's important to us.
That's a good question. And that's information that now that you have, how is it helping you in like your day-to-day operations, with all the equipment and all the processes that you're managing?
Um, well, we gathered all the data and created our own dashboard on Power BI. So the fact that we were able to customize these dashboards to our needs, it means that we created reports that everyone can relate to, using our own company jargon. And so everyone knows what we're talking about. And what has changed is that now energy is the talk of every day, and so much more than just the cost saving, it's also this educational tool, this training tool that we've managed to put in place that it's totally worth it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good to know. And that's something that's available not for you just as a manager, but you're able to give that to the various process managers,
Yeah,
like a daily report, things like that.
yeah, and we also put the dashboard on TV, so even each operator can see them, and so everyone is talking about energy. I mean, now I'm I'm walking around the factory and people say, "Oh, look, I'm switching the light off because Louis is coming." I'm like, guys,
You're
don't
the
don't start working in the dark, but you
You're
know
like the
that
energy patrol.
but
That's
you know
that's
that
awesome.
it's in the back of everyone's mind now, which wasn't to that extent before, and we always assumed that energy was a fixed cost, and now we know it's not. It's a variable cost. We can manage our energy.
And each person has a role to play in that. That's a really good example. Thank you, Louise, for that. I remember in a lecture in college, I was trying not to fall asleep, and there was something interesting my professor said. He said that in 1987, the United Nations Brundtland Commission had defined the term sustainability. So they said sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. With that in mind, and as I was thinking about it, I was just curious to know, how do you see yourself and Pincroft balancing, its needs to meet the economical goals, right? The margins for profitability, along with your environmental responsibilities.
We achieved the ISO 50001 energy management system certification. So
What is
as
that, by the way? Sorry.
so it's basically a certification that's given by the of an international standard organization, and having the certification, we are being audited every year, and we have to show improvement every year. So
Oh,
that is
wow.
one of our sustainability goal, if you want to call it like that. So this is forcing us in a way to reduce our energy consumption. Um, I think the other probably thing that will push us further is the customer demand. Um,
Hmm.
our customer base is constantly asking for more sustainably produced fabric, um, and not only because they want to be more sustainable, but also because they want to pay less. So being sustainable is a way of reducing cost, and in the end, reducing the price to the customer.
No, that's very interesting, Luis, because I don't know for our listeners today if they really understand the challenge that you and Pincroft have. In today's world, when you say, "Okay, I'm going to go green," you just click a box and you say, "Go paperless," right? For Pincroft, you are dealing with printing, you are dealing
Yeah,
with dyeing, you are dealing with a lot of water. So when your customers are saying, "Hey, I want you to be more green," you have to think outside the box. You have to think of, like you said, go to the ISO 50001, volunteer yourself to be audited, and make sure that you adhere to those responsibilities. So that's remarkable, being that leader, in making that path available. So, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's important to better understand how you balance between your environmental and your economic goals.
I mean, the other thing that I could add is that um, by our geographic location, the town grew around the factory. So,
Mm,
because we started so long ago, at first there was only a factory and then a few houses for the factory workers, and then a town grew literally around the factory. So we can't pollute like the way the textile industry used to do. You can't turn the river green or pink depending on what's the color you're dyeing that week.
very
You
true.
can't do these things anymore. So it's and caring about the local community, being a major employer in the local community, it's also important for us, that we don't make them sick or
No, that's
obviously.
very true. Yeah, no, thank you for mentioning that. And that's, we hear about what we call college towns here in the US, a college and then a town that builds around it. But it's
Mhm.
it's great to know that for Pincroft, there is a community beyond just the factory or the employees, but it's a whole town, a whole ecosystem. So, you do have a lot of people to be responsible for. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned earlier, Louise, about this Microsoft, or I think you called it Power BI,
Mhm.
and that you were able to do some really interesting dashboards for monitoring not just the energy, but also the production data at Pincroft. Could you share a little bit about what some of those features were about? Was it an easy thing for you to set up?
Well, I'm not gonna say it was easy, but it's not as complicated as one would imagine. Once you have the data available to you, what you do with it. I I mean, Power BI, it's part of the Microsoft suite, so we've all used Word, we've all used Excel, and we know that there are different levels of people working with Excel. And I
Yeah,
think Power
I'm
BI is
beginner.
just, I think Power BI is just an extension of that. So if you know, if you're comfortable with your pivot tables and your vertical lookups on Microsoft Excel, I think moving to Power BI it doesn't require a degree in IT. 6 months ago, I'd never heard of Power BI, and now I'm creating dashboard every day.
That's encouraging. That means, like,
Yeah,
if you have that data first and foremost, it is now within your power to be able to leverage that data,
yeah,
just like you did, Luis, just like your colleagues at Pincroft did. So, for our listeners, get get the power of data,
yes,
leverage it. It can be able to get you some really actionable insights that you can use for your everyday business. And speaking about insights, Louise, I know that there was a recent collaboration on a case study between Pincroft and Centrica Business Solution. It was interesting to hear about the success that you had. I understand your colleague Graham was also involved with this. For our listeners, if you wanted to have an idea of how successful they were, check this out. 94% reduction in weekend energy costs, 29% reduction in weekday energy costs. And we're talking also about being on track to reduce about 648 tons of equivalent CO2 compared to their 2019 levels. How did you achieve all of that, Luis?
literally just looking at the data. I mean, you're talking about the 94% reduction in the weekend and energy cost. We knew these wastes were there. We always knew about it. But if you don't have the data to push people to do something about the waste,
Hmm.
it's just your word against my word. and, and so, yeah, just having the data and looking at these reports week on week and, you know, I think that's how it started. The whole Louise is looking at it. I better switch that off. you know, because every Monday morning I'll be like, why did we switch that compressor on last week, and
Hmm.
why did we not switch this off? Why? And it's only when you carry on doing this every week that you build then a company culture. Now it's almost like it's built in now. It's everyone knows that okay, it's Friday afternoon. I'm the last one going out. I'll make sure everything is as it should be. And the another thing we've identified were air compressor leaks. So
Oh, wow.
we had a lot of compressed air leaks across the site, and just by looking at the data prior to fixing these leaks and then after, it's a massive saving. If you
Hmm.
if your compressors are on full load trying to fill a system that's not properly shut, you're gonna use energy that you don't need to use.
It's like common sense, but at the same time, it's not common if you're not all on the same visibility level.
Yeah.
You cannot see that data before and after. So it's really interesting that you mentioned about using the technology and having that visibility. To that point too, is it easier for you now to tell your direct reports like, hey, here is how much your actions are costing the bottom line? Is that something you're able to do now?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that we're really tracking on a weekly basis, whereas before we used to take, the end of the month reading on the meters, and you're like, oh, we've used a lot this month. What happened? Whereas now we look at it daily and we think, well, oh, something is not working properly here because this is off the charts. Or we can say, well, we've had a good performance this week. Why can't we do that every week? And it's really like the ability of looking at these dashboards daily, weekly, and also the whole Power BI thing, because the dashboards, you can make them look the way you want. So you
Hmm.
can make them talk to the operator, or you can make them talk to the leadership. Our our managing director is looking at these reports every day and is like, I wouldn't want to be without them anymore.
Oh, wow. That's amazing for him to say that. You know, That's awesome. And I'm just thinking, it's, I just a little culture element. I love Sherlock Holmes. I know it's in the UK and such, and so I think about like you having that data, you don't have to wait to be like a Sherlock Holmes a month later. You can be a Sherlock Holmes tomorrow. You can find out those waste, those sources of it,
Mhm.
the behaviors that people are having towards this waste and begin to shift that. And you just mentioned about your executive director, and that's like, from the top down, you can have everyone buy into that. How quick was that buy-in from your leadership? Was it like the other week, or did it take time to get there?
No, I think the buy-in from the leadership would happen pretty early on. Once you start to realize how much you're gonna be able to see and how much you're gonna be able to track, I think the buying comes pretty quickly. Um, Probably from the shop floor level, the buying was a bit slower because, oh, someone's looking at me now. But I think now that they realize why we're doing it and that it's for long-term sustainability of the business, I think the buying is integral now. Everyone's following it and waiting for the reports. If I'm a bit late one morning at sending out the reports, say, Louise, what's going on?
Wow, they're even holding you accountable for that. So that's
Yeah.
good. That's sounds like a really great culture now that you have at Pincroft, and
Mhm.
I applaud you and the team for that. So, I just thinking about the future for you and for the Pincroft family. What is that? Do you have any plans you have in mind for the future?
Well, yeah, as I said, we we don't want to stop where we go. We always want to improve even further. So, um, for next year, we are raising our target, saying we're gonna save an extra 2% on electricity, an extra 3% on gas compared to what we've achieved this year. We've also set new targets on water saving.
Hmm.
So all that, I think now that we've had we've achieved the low hanging fruit, so now we need to go technically into the fabrics. How much, how can we change the process? Um, what what can we do even further? Um, so that is gonna take more technical work. Um, Thankfully, we've got a very good technical team here at Pincroft, a very experienced team. So they're working on that continuously. Um,
That's good.
yeah, the long-term goal is like carry on going the extra mile. And then on Power Radar, we originally there was one area of the factory where we thought, well, the output of this department is quite small compared to the rest of the factory, so we're not sure that the return on investment is worthwhile of installing Power Radar in this department. And now we are starting to talk about it, saying, you know what, the data we're getting, it's not just about saving energy, it's also as I was saying, the training tool, the educational tool. It
Exactly.
it shifted the mind throughout the factory. So why not do it there for that purpose? So that's what we're looking at the moment, implementing it in that extra department.
Hmm. Yeah, for our listeners, sometimes it's not just about the energy cost for you to implement this technology. You're also empowering your employees, like Louise
Yeah.
said, to be able to understand why they're doing, you know, process A or operations A, and how are they making an impact as, a family, as part of a company workforce. So thank you for sharing that, Luis. This is really helpful. I really love listening and hearing you share about your insights and your experiences. As we close, are there any last words or thoughts that you would like to share for our listeners today?
Well, in the current pandemic climate, more than ever before, we've had to adapt to new ways of working and maximize productivity. And I think we have to make sure we take these learnings and carry on as we do, to be always more sustainable, not only to reduce our costs, but also to satisfy our customers who are
Exactly.
always asking up for us to be more, to be greener, to produce fabric in a greener way. And I think we have to ensure we do that if we want to be here for another 130 years.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for making time once again, Louise. Amongst your very busy schedule, and just sharing your experiences, and how your team and Pincroft has really set an example in leading the charge for your sustainability journey. It's very relevant, not just in the UK, but also globally, about how defining and implementing goals for your environmental impact can also create value to your economic bottom line, not just for today but also for future generations. So thank you so much, Luis, and take care to all our listeners today. Bye.